a billionaire, for Christ's sake. It makes no sense that my wife is working like a slave. Please let me employ maids to do these jobs.
No, baby. Having maids at home is not good.
What do you mean having maids is not good? You're no longer looking good as you used to, now too tired for me. Is this what you want for yourself?
I will try and adjust, baby. Baby, there is no food in the house, no food for the kids to eat. They are losing weight every day.
As you can see, I have no money for food. Business is really slow.
So are they supposed to go hungry because business is slow? You know I don't work because you asked me not to work.
Woman, please. I don't have any money for you guys, okay? Just try and manage anything and eat.
You know, this is just the beginning. I will spoil you and make you hate money because there is a lot to spend on you.
I trust you, baby. I love you so much. You are my dream man, okay?
Chief Chlck's sprawling mansion in the heart of Ikoyi, casting a warm, golden glow over the expensive Italian leather sofas and the pristine mirror-finished marble floors. Outside, the manicured lawns and the gentle lap of the swimming pool spoke of a life touched by unimaginable fortune. Inside, the quiet hum of central air conditioning was the only sound in a house built on the foundation of billions. Chlck was a titan in the Lagos real estate sector. His name, spoken in hushed, respectful tones across boardrooms from Victoria Island to Lekki, was synonymous with success. He was a man who moved markets with a single signature, a mogul who owned stretches of prime land that others could only dream of inheriting. Yet if you asked Chlck what his greatest asset was, he would never point to his bank accounts, his fleet of custom-built luxury cars, or the towers bearing his family name. He would point, without a single shred of hesitation, to his beautiful wife, Ifeoma. To Chlck, Ifeoma was not just his wife. She was his crown jewel, the anchor of his soul, and the rhythm to his heartbeat. In the early days of their marriage, Chlck made it his life's personal mission to ensure that Ifeoma lived like royalty. He loved her fiercely, with a protective, consuming passion that only grew deeper with each passing day. He took immense pride in seeing her radiate joy. And to him, the best use of his vast wealth was to spend it lavishly on her comfort. If my money cannot give you the best life possible, Ifeoma, then it is useless to me, he would often say, pulling her close into his arms. And spend he did. Their weekends were the stuff of high society fairy tales. It was nothing for Chlck to look at Ifeoma on a Thursday evening and say, "My love, you look a bit stressed. Let's have dinner in Paris this weekend." By Friday afternoon, they would be cruising at 35,000 feet in a private jet, bound for Europe. He showered her with the finest things the world could offer, limitless diamond jewelry sets from top designers, the latest Hermes Birkin bags delivered directly to their door, and a wardrobe filled with couture pieces that left the high-fashion elites of Lagos green with envy. Whenever they attended high-society weddings or exclusive gala nights, all eyes naturally gravitated toward them. Ifeoma was a vision of absolute grace and elegance. Her skin glowed with the unmistakable luster of expensive treatments, and her laughter was musical, filling Chlck's heart with a profound sense of accomplishment. He would hold her hand tightly on the red carpets, basking in the pride of being the man who kept that dazzling smile on her face. He ensured she never lifted a finger. A full complement of chefs, drivers, and assistants managed the estate, allowing Ifeoma to simply exist as the queen of his heart. In those blissful, early years, their love was an unbreakable fortress of romance, wealth, and mutual adoration. Chlck believed, with every fiber of his being, that this beautiful dream would last forever. The blissful, uninterrupted romance of the early years eventually gave way to a new, profound chapter of their lives. Within 4 short years of marriage, the quiet museum-like stillness of the Ikoyi mansion was utterly shattered by the beautiful, chaotic arrival of 3 children. First came their son, Emeka, whose booming cry filled the halls with a new kind of energy. He was quickly followed by the twins, Chidi and little Michelle. Chlck was overjoyed. He celebrated each birth by throwing lavish, no-expense-spared child dedication parties, gifting Ifeoma brand-new luxury SUVs to mark her transition into motherhood. On paper, they were the picture-perfect, blessed Nigerian family. But behind the closed, towering gates of the estate, the reality of their daily life was shifting dramatically. The mansion, which once felt like a peaceful sanctuary tailored for 2 lovers, rapidly transformed into a frantic, never-ending whirlwind. The pristine marble floors that used to reflect the soft glow of designer chandeliers were now permanently littered with colorful plastic toys, half-empty baby bottles, and scattered picture books. The quiet hum of the central air conditioning was completely drowned out by a symphony of crying babies, toddlers racing down the long corridors, and the constant, high-pitched demands of growing children. With 3 toddlers running around, the sheer weight of managing the household grew exponentially. It wasn't just about feeding the babies. It was a non-stop cycle of boiling water, sterilizing equipment, preparing separate meals for picky toddlers, scrubbing stained carpets, and doing mountains of laundry that seemed to multiply overnight. Because Ifeoma had strictly insisted on handling everything herself, the burden fell squarely and heavily onto her shoulders alone. The seamless, orderly lifestyle she once enjoyed vanished. Her mornings no longer began with a slow, peaceful awakening in their king-sized bed, followed by a warm bath and a freshly prepared breakfast. Instead, her days erupted at 4:30 a.m. to the piercing sound of a crying twin, thrusting her immediately into a high-speed sprint that wouldn't end until long past midnight. As the weeks bled into months, the joyous glow of new motherhood began to cast a long, exhausting shadow. Ifeoma found herself trapped in a relentless, unforgiving routine. She was perpetually multitasking, trying to soothe a teething chitty on her hip while stirring a pot of soup on the stove, all while monitoring Emeka to ensure he didn't tumble down the grand staircase. The heavy, unyielding silence of the late nights offered no relief. While Chlck slept deeply, resting for his intense boardroom meetings the next day, Ifeoma was awake, pacing the floor with a restless infant, her body aching with a bone-deep fatigue that no amount of sleep could easily cure. The crown jewel of Chlck's life was gradually being buried under the crushing, solitary weight of an overwhelming domestic kingdom. Chief Chlck was a man trained to spot inefficiencies and structural cracks long before they caused a building to collapse. In his boardrooms, if a department was overwhelmed, the solution was simple: allocate capital, hire the best talent, and delegate the burden. It broke his heart to see his own home running like a failing enterprise, with his beloved wife serving as its sole, exhausted laborer. Coming home late one evening after a grueling negotiation in Victoria Island, Chlck walked into the kitchen to find Ifeoma slumped against the marble countertop. The clock on the wall read 11 p.m. A mountain of unwashed pots loomed over the sink. A basket of damp baby clothes sat by her feet, and the rich aroma of half-cooked soup hung heavy in the air. Ifeoma was fast asleep on her feet, her head resting uncomfortably against her forearm. Chlck tiptoed across the floor, wrapped his arms gently around her waist, and kissed her cheek. Ifeoma startled awake, her eyes bloodshot, instantly reaching for a dish towel as if reprimanding herself for resting.
I'm a billionaire, for Christ's sake. It makes no sense that my wife is working like a slave. Please let me employ maids to do these jobs.
No, baby, having maids at home is not good.
What do you mean having maids is not good? You're no longer looking good as you used to, now too tired for me. Is this what you want for yourself?
I will try and adjust, baby.
My love, please, Chlck said, his voice laced with a mixture of tenderness and deep concern. He took the towel from her hands and led her to a kitchen stool, forcing her to sit down. Look at you. This stress is eating you alive. We cannot continue like this. He knelt before her, holding her rough, calloused hands in his. I am a billionaire, Ifeoma. It makes absolutely no sense for my wife to be working like a slave in her own house. Tomorrow morning, I am calling an agency. I want to hire 2 live-in housemaids, a professional nanny for the twins, and a chef to take over the kitchen. I want you to have your life back. But Ifeoma pulled her hands away, her expression hardening. She shook her head with a stubborn finality that Chlck had come to fear. Chlck, no. I have told you this before, she said, her voice strained but firm. I do not want strangers in my house. I don't want some unknown girl moving around my kitchen, cooking for my husband, or putting things in your food. And I certainly will not have a stranger raising my children. Who knows what kind of spirits or bad habits they will introduce to this home. Ifeoma, we will background check them. We will pay them top tier. It is not about the money, Chlck, she interrupted, her tone rising. A good Nigerian virtue dictates that a woman must build her own home with her own hands. My mother raised 6 of us without a single maid, and her husband was a big man too. Am I lazy? I can handle my house. It is my duty as a wife and a mother. Despite Chlck's repeated pleas, arguments, and gentle begs over the following weeks, Ifeoma adamantly refused to compromise. She viewed the introduction of housemates not as a relief, but as an indictment of her capability as a traditional African woman. She locked herself into a stubborn vow of solitary labor, entirely blind to the reality that the heavy walls of her pride were beginning to crush the very marriage she was trying to protect. As the weeks bled into grueling months, the relentless, unyielding cycle of manual labor began to exact a devastating toll on Ifeoma. The vibrant, meticulously put-together woman who once commanded the attention of every room she entered slowly began to fade away, buried beneath the exhausting reality of her self-imposed chores. The change did not happen overnight. It was a gradual, stealthy erosion. It started when Ifeoma stopped booking her bi-weekly appointments at the high-end medical spa in Victoria Island. Her skincare routine, which used to consist of premium serums and delicate lotions, was abandoned for a hasty splash of water on her face in the morning. Soon, her skin lost its signature, translucent glow, becoming dull and marked by the dark, heavy circles of chronic sleep deprivation. Her wardrobe experienced the most drastic downgrade. The beautiful silk dresses, the tailored linen trousers, and the colorful, intricate lace outfits Chlck loved to buy her remained locked away in her walk-in closet, gathering dust. In their place, Ifeoma adopted a uniform of survival. Every single day, she tied a faded, worn-out wrapper around her waist, paired with oversized, stretched-out t-shirts that were constantly stained with baby formula, palm oil, or sweat. Her hair, once styled into flawless, bouncy weaves or neat, intricate braids, was now permanently hidden. To save time, she began keeping it in a rough, unbraided afro, hastily tucked inside a stretched-out, unkempt satin bonnet that she wore from morning till night. One Saturday morning, Chlck walked into their master bathroom and caught Ifeoma looking into the mirror. She was holding a bottle of expensive perfume he had brought back from London, staring at it as if she could no longer remember how to use it. Ifeoma, Chlck said softly, leaning against the doorframe. The luxury event for Chief Allah's anniversary is tonight. I already asked the driver to pick up your new dress. Please, let's get you ready. Go to the salon. Let them do your hair and nails. I want to step out with my beautiful queen. Ifeoma didn't look at him. She just let out a dry, bitter laugh, dropping the perfume bottle back onto the counter with a loud clatter. Step out? To go and do what, Chlck? She asked, her voice cracking with exhaustion as she adjusted the stained t-shirt she was wearing. Who will watch the twins? Who will blend the beans for the children's breakfast? Look at my hands, they are rough from scrubbing pots, and you are talking about salon. I don't have time for all that vanity anymore. She walked past him, smelling faintly of onions and bleach, without giving him a second glance. Chlck stood in the empty bathroom, staring at the reflection of the luxury items his wealth had bought. Items that were now completely useless. The woman who used to fill those clothes with grace was gone, replaced by a stranger who seemed to have forgotten how to care for herself. The distance between Chlck and Ifeoma did not widen with a dramatic explosion. It grew in the quiet, heavy spaces of things left unsaid. The home that used to be Chlck's ultimate sanctuary, a place where he could escape the cutthroat pressures of the Lagos corporate world, began to feel like a high-stress zone he desperately wanted to avoid. Every evening followed the same predictable, depressing pattern. Chlck would drive through the gates of his Ikoyi estate, hoping against hope that tonight would be different. But the moment he stepped through the massive front doors, he was greeted not by the warm smile of his beautiful wife, but by a wall of chaotic noise and domestic tension. One evening, determined to break the icy wall between them, Chlck walked into the living room carrying a large bouquet of fresh orchids and a velvet box containing a diamond bracelet. He found Ifeoma sitting on the rug, her face strained, frantically trying to feed a screaming chitty, while Michelle pulled at the hem of her faded wrapper. "Good evening, my love," Chlck said, offering a warm smile as he presented the gifts. "I thought these might brighten your day." Ifeoma barely glanced up. She wiped a stray drop of baby food from her forehead, her satin bonnet askew. "Chlck, please put them on the table," she sighed, her voice heavy with irritation. "Can't you see I am struggling here? Instead of bringing flowers and jewelry, you could have at least dropped your briefcase and held chitty for me." Chlck smile froze. He quietly placed the expensive gifts on the side table, where they looked completely out of place next to a pile of dirty diapers. Ifeoma, I just got back from a 10-hour board meeting. I am tired too. And the only reason you are struggling is because you choose to. The offer for help is still on the table. Ifeoma snapped, her eyes flashing with a dangerous mix of fatigue and resentment. Am I playing games here, Chlck? I am busy keeping your house together and raising your heirs, and you are here talking about looks and housemaids. If you cannot help me physically right now, then leave us alone. The rejection stung deeply. Chlck turned around and walked upstairs to their bedroom, the heavy silence of the master suite offering cold comfort. He looked at the king-sized bed, realizing it had been months since they had shared an intimate moment. Whenever he tried to touch her, she would push him away, claiming her back ached or that she was simply too tired to breathe, let alone love him. As the weeks rolled on, Chlck's loneliness turned into a bitter resentment. He began to dread closing from work. He would sit in his air-conditioned office in Victoria Island long after his staff had gone home, staring at the Lagos Lagoon, feeling completely single despite being married to the woman he adored. The deep, passionate connection they once shared was fast evaporating, leaving behind a cold, widening gulf that was ripe for a dangerous distraction. The distraction Chlck had unconsciously been drifting toward finally arrived on a rainy Thursday evening. Seeking refuge from the heavy, tense atmosphere of his Ikoyi home, Chlck instructed his driver to take him to an exclusive, high-end lounge tucked away in a quiet corner of Victoria Island. It was a sanctuary for the Lagos elite, a place where soft jazz muffled the roaring corporate stress of the day and premium whiskey flowed like water. Chlck sat in a dimly lit VIP booth, nursing a glass of single malt scotch, his mind heavy with the memory of another morning argument with Ifeoma over her unkempt appearance. He was staring blankly into the amber liquid when a soft, melodic laugh broke his train of thought. He looked up and saw her. Her name was Cynthia. She was a young, striking woman who moved with the effortless confidence of someone who knew exactly how beautiful she was. Cynthia was everything Ifeoma currently was not. Her skin was a flawless, even tone of rich caramel, glowing beneath the soft lounge lights. Her hair was styled into a sleek, perfectly laid frontal weave that cascaded over her shoulders, and she wore a tailored, form-fitting emerald green dress that accentuated every curve. She smelled heavily of a rare, expensive Parisian perfume, a scent that instantly reminded Chlck of the early, luxurious days of his marriage. Sensing the wealthy, lonely aura radiating from the real estate mogul, Cynthia played her cards expertly. She caught his eye, offered a slow, lingering smile, and glided over to his booth. A handsome man like you shouldn't be drinking alone with such a heavy frown, she whispered smoothly, her voice a soothing contrast to the sharp, exhausted tones Chlck was used to hearing at home. May I join you, Chief? Chlck, starved for pleasant female companionship, readily agreed.
You know, this is just the beginning. I will spoil you and make you hate money because there is a lot to spend on you.
I trust you, baby. I love you so much. You are my dream man, okay?
As the night wore on, Cynthia proved to be a master of undivided attention. She listened to Chlck speak, laughing at his jokes with genuine delight, and hanging on to his every word. She didn't talk about crying babies, dirty laundry, or domestic burdens. Instead, she asked about his business, praised his brilliance, and stroked his bruised ego with practiced precision. For the first time in over a year, Chlck felt seen, appreciated, and desired. Before the night ended, numbers were exchanged. What started as a casual conversation quickly spiraled into a dangerous, secret romance. Cynthia became Chlck's regular escape. Whenever the stress at home became unbearable, he would drive straight to Cynthia's upscale apartment. Chlck began to spend lavishly on her, funding her expensive shopping sprees, buying her diamond jewelry, and paying for her luxury vacations to Dubai. Cynthia accepted the wealth with open, greedy hands, ensuring that every time Chlck was in her presence, she was a picture of absolute perfection, peace, and adoration. She became the perfect, beautiful parasite, slowly draining the affection that belonged to Chlck's family, while Chlck, blinded by the sudden rush of validation, fell deeper and deeper into her carefully laid trap. Cynthia was an enterprising woman who kept her eyes firmly fixed on the prize. She didn't just want the crumbs of Chief Chlck's vast wealth. She wanted the entire bakery. She monitored his movements, noted the staggering amounts he spent without blinking, and realized that as long as his heart harbored even a shred of guilt or residual love for his wife and children, she would only ever be a hidden secret. She wanted the legitimacy. She wanted the mansions in her name, the heavy bank transfers, and his absolute devotion. But more than anything, she noticed that whenever Chlck looked at his phone and saw missed calls from his home, a shadow of conflict would cross his face. I cannot share this man with a woman wearing a satin bonnet in Ikoyi, Cynthia muttered to herself one afternoon, her eyes narrowing as she looked around her apartment, which was already filled with luxury items Chlck had bought her. He must belong to me alone. Determined to lock down his fortune permanently, Cynthia reached out to a trusted confidant who dealt in dark realities. By midnight on a Friday night, she was sitting in the back of a tinted car, traveling far away from the glitz of Victoria Island, deep into the dark, forested outskirts of the city where the neon lights of Lagos faded into an ominous, heavy silence. The car stopped before a dilapidated, mud-walled structure hidden beneath the massive canopy of an ancient Iroko tree. The air hung thick with the smell of burning herbs, damp earth, and dried blood. This was the shrine of a notorious native doctor. Cynthia stepped out of the car, her expensive designer heels sinking into the dirt, but her face remained cold and resolute. She walked into the smoky, dimly lit shrine. Skulls, rusted iron bells, and bowls of dark potions lined the walls. Sitting on a woven mat in the center was the herbalist, his eyes cloudy, his skin painted with white chalk. "What does a beautiful city woman want from the spirits?" the native doctor croaked, his voice like grinding stones. Cynthia did not hesitate. She reached into her luxury handbag and pulled out a crisp, clear photograph of Chief Chlck smiling at a recent corporate gala. Beside it, she placed a thick bundle of foreign currency. "Tie him," Cynthia commanded, her voice dropping to a ruthless whisper. "Bind his mind, his heart, and his billions to me. Make him completely forget his wife. Make him look at his children and feel absolutely nothing. Let his eyes see only me, and let his hands open only to spend on me." The native doctor picked up the photograph, a sinister grin spreading across his face as he counted the money. He began to chant in a low, guttural tongue, striking an iron bell that echoed eerily through the night. He grabbed a heavy ball of black and red thread, wrapping it tightly around Chlck's photograph, binding it tighter and tighter until the image was completely buried in the dark strings. He then drove a rusted iron nail straight through the center of the bound photo, locking it into a wooden carved figure. "It is done," the herbalist finally whispered, blowing a gray powder into the air. "The chain is locked. His eyes are closed to his blood. From this moment on, his family will become like total strangers to him, and his wealth will flow only into your hands." The dark spiritual charm took hold of Chief Chlck almost overnight, settling over his consciousness like a thick, impenetrable blanket of frost. When he woke up the morning after Cynthia's midnight visit to the shrine, the world looked entirely different to him. A strange, heavy fog enveloped his senses, dulling his emotions and erasing decades of shared history with a single, icy stroke. When he looked across the master bedroom at Ifeoma, who was quietly sleeping with her satin bonnet slightly askew, he felt absolutely nothing. The protective instinct, the deep-seated guilt, and the residual warmth that usually stirred in his chest had completely vanished. It was as if he were looking at a complete stranger occupying a room in a hotel. The change manifested immediately in the family finances. The first major blow fell when the school administrator of the children's elite international school called Ifeoma, politely informing her that their tuition for the new term was 2 weeks overdue. Confused and embarrassed, Ifeoma waited for Chlck in the living room that evening. When he walked in, his eyes were blank and distant, completely ignoring the children who ran toward him. "Chlck, please," Ifeoma said, holding the school invoice in her hands. "The school called me today. The children's tuition hasn't been paid. And the driver said the card you give him for weekly groceries was declined at the supermarket. What is happening?" Chlck didn't even stop walking toward the grand staircase. He paused on the first step, looking down at her with a face carved from stone. His voice, when he spoke, was flat, devoid of any of the tenderness he used to possess. "Business is slow," he lied smoothly, his eyes completely vacant. "The real estate market is crashing, and the economy is bad. All my capital is locked up in stalled projects. Everyone in Lagos is managing right now, Ifeoma, so you need to go and manage whatever you have left. Manage. Ifeoma's voice shook as she followed him up the stairs. Kola, this is your family. The children need to eat. They need to go to school. How can a billionaire's house be running out of food? Kola didn't answer. He walked into his room and locked the door behind him, leaving his wife standing in the corridor, shivering from an unnatural, emotional winter that had suddenly frozen the heart of her home. The heavy allowances he used to deposit into her account completely dried up, replaced by a terrifying, unyielding silence. While a heavy, suffocating winter settled over the mansion in Ikoyi, a golden summer of unparalleled extravagance was taking place just a few kilometers away in Lekki. Blinded by the native doctor's dark spell, Kola's financial universe had completely inverted. The man who claimed he didn't have a single kobo to pay his children's school fees was running a pipeline of endless millions directly into Cynthia's bank accounts. Under the influence of the charm, Kola's generosity toward his side chick became manic and wild. One morning, Cynthia woke up, stretched languidly on her silk sheets and pouted. Chief, this apartment is getting too small for me. The security here is just so basic. A man of your status shouldn't have his woman living in a crowded complex. Kola, staring at her with wide, vacant eyes, nodded like a puppet on a string. Anything you want, my star. Whatever you desire, it is yours. That very afternoon, Kola instructed his real estate firm to clear the title on a brand new, ultra-modern 5-bedroom fully detached mansion in one of the most exclusive gated communities in Lekki. The property, valued at hundreds of millions of naira, was instantly transferred into Cynthia's name. He didn't stop there. To celebrate the new house, he surprised her by parking a brand new, zero-mileage Range Rover Autobiography in the driveway, its steering wheel wrapped in a massive red bow. Cynthia squealed with delight, kissing Kola's cold, unresponsive cheek while secretly laughing at how easy it was to drain a billionaire. Meanwhile, back in Ikoyi, Ifeoma was living in a nightmare. Desperate to keep her family afloat and shield her children from the sudden, terrifying poverty, she emptied her personal savings account. She sold off the gold jewelry Kola had bought her during their anniversary trips, using the money to pay off the immediate school debts and keep electricity running in the house. Every evening, she would sit by the kitchen window, watching the clock tick past midnight. When Kola finally returned, smelling of expensive drinks and Cynthia's signature Parisian perfume, Ifeoma would beg him for grocery money. Kola, look at the kitchen. We are down to our last bag of rice. She would weep, her voice hoarse. The children are asking why we don't have meat in our soup anymore. Please, I know things are tough with your business, but even a little money for food will do. Kola would merely look through her, his expression cold and detached. I told you there is no money. Stop asking me for what I don't have. Manage. He would then retire to his room to text Cynthia, sending her confirmations of heavy bank transfers for her weekend spa treatments, entirely unaware that while he was building a paradise for a stranger, his own flesh and blood were standing on the precipice of starvation. As the dry spell stretched from weeks into agonizing months, the once glamorous Ikoyi mansion became a quiet tomb of despair. The lack of support from Kola brought the household completely to its knees. Ifeoma's personal savings were entirely depleted, and the jewelry she had sold could only sustain them for so long in a harsh, unforgiving economy. The physical toll on the family was devastating. The children, who used to be chubby, energetic, and full of life, began to change rapidly before Ifeoma's eyes. They were losing weight daily, their small frames shrinking into their clothes. Little Michelle's collarbones became sharp and pronounced, and Emeka's ribs began to show clearly whenever he changed his shirt. Their skin lost its healthy, childhood glow, turning dull and dry. They no longer ran down the corridors or filled the house with laughter. Instead, they sat quietly on the sofas, drained of energy, their little bodies preserving what little strength they had left. Ifeoma herself looked like a shadow, a ghost wandering through a massive, empty palace. She spent her nights weeping silently into her pillow, crying until her eyes were permanently swollen and bloodshot. She couldn't understand how the man who once adored her, the man who used to worship the ground she walked on, could look at his own children withering away and feel nothing. One evening, with a heavy heart, she managed to scrape together the very last remnants of food in the house, a watery bowl of plain Gary with no milk, no sugar, and no fish. She sat on the kitchen floor, watching her children share the meager meal with slow, unenthusiastic spoons. When Chlck walked into the house later that night, the contrast was sickening. He looked immaculate, wearing a tailored senator outfit, his skin looking fresh from the air-conditioned luxury of Cynthia's Chlck mansion. Ifeoma intercepted him in the hallway, blocking his path to the stairs. "Chlck, look at your children," she whispered, her voice cracking with a terrifying mixture of hunger and grief. She pointed toward the living room. "Look at them. They are shrinking every day. They are losing weight daily, Chlck. We are starving in this house while you tell me business is slow. How can a man with your name let his household look like beggars?" Chlck didn't even blink. The dark charm binding his heart made him completely immune to her tears. He looked at his emaciated wife and his skinny children with the cold detachment of a stranger looking at a stray animal on the street. "I have already told you the situation," Chlck said, his voice flat, cutting through her grief like an icy blade. "The economy is bad for everyone. If you cannot manage what is left, that is your problem. Do not disturb my peace." He pushed past her, leaving Ifeoma to collapse against the wall, sobbing violently as she clutched her empty stomach, completely unaware that her husband had just approved a multi-million naira interior decoration contract for his side chick's new home. The breaking point arrived on a quiet, suffocating Tuesday afternoon. The heavy Ikoyi mansion felt entirely devoid of life, save for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Ifeoma had fallen into a deep, exhausted sleep on the living room couch, her body completely worn out from a morning spent hunting for a neighbor who might lend her a single cup of beans to feed the children. Upstairs, Chlck sat in his master bedroom. He was staring blankly at his phone, waiting for a text message from Cynthia about an upcoming weekend getaway to a private resort. The dark fog of the native doctor's charm still gripped his mind, holding his real thoughts hostage in a prison of unnatural indifference. The heavy mahogany door of his room creaked open, moving slowly on its hinges. Chlck didn't look up immediately, expecting it to be Ifeoma coming to beg him for money yet again. But instead of his wife's heavy, desperate footsteps, a tiny, tentative sound shuffled across the thick bedroom rug. "Daddy." The voice was a tiny, frail whisper. Chlck blinked and turned his head toward the side of his bed. Standing there was his 5-year-old daughter, Michelle. She was wearing a faded pink dress that had once fitted her snugly, but now hung loosely over her shrinking, fragile frame like a sack. Her cheeks, which used to be beautifully chubby and dimpled, were hollow and pale. Her dark eyes, usually bright and full of childhood mischief, looked massive against her small, starved face, swimming with heavy, unshed tears. She reached out a tiny, trembling hand, her fingers catching the hem of his tailored trousers. She pulled at the fabric gently, her lower lip quivering. "Daddy," she whispered again, a large tear finally spilling over her lashes and running down her dry cheek. "My tummy hurts. I'm so hungry. Mummy said there is no more food in the kitchen. Daddy, please give us money to buy bread." Chlck froze. He looked down at his daughter's tiny hand clutching his trousers. In that exact fraction of a second, something miraculous happened. It was as if a violent, blinding bolt of lightning tore through the dark heavens, striking his brain with absolute, shattering force. The sheer, desperate innocence of his favorite daughter's cry acted as a spiritual hammer, smashing the heavy, rusted chains of Cynthia's charm into a million pieces. The thick, dark fog that had enveloped his mind for months violently cleared in an instant. His chest heaved as a massive surge of air rushed back into his lungs, and his eyes dilated. The spell was broken. Chlck blinked rapidly, shaking his head as if waking from a decades-long coma. He looked at Michelle, and for the first time in months, he truly saw her. He didn't see a stranger. He saw his baby girl, his favorite child, withering away right in front of him. He looked at her hollow cheeks, her visible collarbones, and the profound, terrifying shadow of hunger painted across her small body. The illusion Cynthia had placed over his eyes shattered completely, revealing the raw, horrific truth. A sharp, agonizing pain pierced Chlck's chest as his true conscience returned with a vengeance. He realized, with a wave of absolute horror that made his stomach turn, that he had been systematically starving his own flesh and blood. While he was buying sports cars and luxury estates for a manipulative stranger, his own beautiful daughter was begging him for bread. Michelle. Chlck choked out, his voice cracking violently. He dropped his phone to the floor, completely forgetting about Cynthia, and fell to his knees on the rug, wrapping his arms around his frail daughter as the tears finally erupted from his eyes. The moment Michelle's tiny hand touched Chlck's trousers, a seismic shift occurred not just in the Ikoyi master bedroom, but miles away in the luxurious heart of Chlck. In her newly acquired mansion, Cynthia was sitting at her marble kitchen island, sipping champagne and scrolling through luxury furniture catalogs on her tablet. Suddenly, a sharp, icy wind swept through her sealed, air-conditioned living room. On the glass coffee table, a small, decorative clay pot she had brought back from the outskirts of the city violently cracked down the middle, shattering into pieces with a loud bang. Cynthia gasped, dropping her glass as a wave of intense dread washed over her. The spiritual thread had snapped. The charm had faded into nothingness. Back in Ikoyi, Chlck was experiencing a devastating awakening. The shattering of the spell didn't just bring back his memory. It brought back a crushing avalanche of guilt, clarity, and absolute horror. Michelle, my baby, my princess, Chlck wept openly, his large body shaking as he held his frail daughter against his chest. He could feel every single bone in her back. I am so sorry. Daddy is so sorry. He scooped her up into his arms, surprised and terrified by how light she had become, and rushed downstairs. The house, which had looked normal to him just minutes before, now appeared exactly as it was, a neglected, dusty monument to his own cruelty. He reached the living room and stopped dead in his tracks. Ifeoma was still asleep on the couch, her face pale, her lips dry and cracked. On the center table sat the empty, watery bowl of Gary the children had been forced to share. Nearby, Emeka and Chidi sat quietly, their eyes hollow, looking like little old men instead of vibrant young boys. The reality hit Chlck like a physical blow to the chest. He had been living a lie, trapped in a demonic illusion while his family stood on the precipice of death. He walked over to the couch and fell to his knees beside his wife, gently placing Michelle down. Ifeoma. Ifeoma, please wake up, Chlck pleaded, his voice thick with tears as he reached out and took her rough, calloused hand. Ifeoma startled awake, her eyes instantly filling with the defensive, weary fear she had carried for months. She tried to pull her hand away, bracing herself for another cold rejection. Chlck, please. If you want to tell me to manage again, just save your breath. I am too tired to hear it today. No. Ifeoma. No. Chlck cried, gripping her hand tighter and placing it against his wet cheek. Look at me. Please look at my eyes. Ifeoma paused, looking closely at her husband. The cold, vacant, dead stare that had terrified her for months was gone. In its place were eyes full of deep pain, fierce love, and a desperate plea for mercy. I am back, my love. I am so sorry, Chlck sobbed, bowing his head onto her lap. I don't know what came over me. I don't know how I became so blind. I have starved you. I have starved my own children. Please, Ifeoma, forgive me. Please. Ifeoma stared at her weeping husband. The billionaire who never bowed to anyone, now broken and groveling at her feet. As the truth of his return sank in, the heavy wall of grief she had carried for months finally crumbled, and she burst into deep, healing tears, pulling him close as the long, dark night of their family finally came to an end. True repentance is not just spoken, it is seen in action. Chief Chlck did not waste a single second wallowing in his guilt. That very afternoon he picked up his phone and began moving mountains with his wealth, but this time, every single kobo was directed toward restoring his kingdom. Within 2 hours, delivery vans began rolling into the Ikoyi estate. Boxes of premium groceries, fresh meats, high-quality milk, fruits, and organic provisions filled the kitchen to the brim. Chlck didn't stop there. He immediately cut off Cynthia entirely. He blocked her on all platforms, frozen the joint accounts, and instructed his legal team to forcefully evict her from the Chlck mansion, reclaiming every asset he had blindly bought under the spell. Cynthia was left with absolutely nothing, a fitting end for her greed. Determined to be a better man and a proper husband, Chlck took total authority over the household's well-being. Remembering the root of the stress that had started the distance, he bypassed Ifeoma's protests entirely. The very next morning he employed 3 highly trained, professional housemaids to take full charge of the mansion's cooking, deep cleaning, and laundry. Initially, Ifeoma's stubbornness remained. She didn't support the presence of the maids, watching them suspiciously from the stairs, and trying to grab the broom to sweep the floors herself. But Chlck would gently but firmly take the broom from her hands, guide her back to a sofa, and kiss her forehead. "No, Ifeoma," he would say softly. "You have suffered enough. Let them do their jobs. Your only job now is to rest, heal, and let me take care of you." With the immense, crushing burden of the housework permanently lifted from her shoulders, the transformation in Ifeoma was nothing short of a miracle. She finally had time to sleep for 8 hours. She returned to her favorite medical spas, ate nutritious meals alongside her children, and visited the finest salons in Lagos. The faded wrappers and the unkempt satin bonnet were permanently thrown into the trash. Within a few short months, the children regained their healthy weight, their laughter once again echoing through the grand halls of the mansion. And Ifeoma? Her breathtaking, radiant beauty returned tenfold. She started looking incredibly good for her husband, stepping out in magnificent designer laces and glowing like a true billionaire's queen. Chlck never took his eyes off his family again. He became the best husband and father, spending on them limitlessly, protecting them fiercely, and ensuring they lived happily ever after. Thank you so much for watching this incredible story. If you loved how Chief Chlck came back to his senses and restored his family, please like this video and share it with your friends and family. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss new stories.